Welcome to Red and Yellow, the podcast about all things to do with refereeing at grassroots level, looking at the laws of football, speaking to guests, and trying to help you become a better referee, with Adam Humphreys and me, Ed Connell.
Hello, loyal listeners. It's Adam here, and I just wanted to get in early on this episode of Red or Yellow to remind you to please send in your questions about refereeing or anything you feel like you might need help with in terms of your game. That's why we are here, to help you improve to be a better referee. We really enjoy getting questions from our listeners as voice notes via email or DM or on social media. Being able to help you is why we created this podcast, and to offer our insights and to be able to help you by drawing on our experience. Added to that, if you are a very fit listener, then please don't forget to follow us on all the social medias. It's at Red or Yellow Pod. As well as remember to like and subscribe in your podcast feed. Thank you so much for being here, and let's get on with the show. Well, hello.
Morning, Adam.
Morning. Well, afternoon, evening for me. How are you?
Well, once again, I'm not overly happy about this arrangement of me speaking to you early in the morning and you having a leisurely, was it afternoon, early evening?
It's 7 p.m. It's not leisurely. I've not had dinner and I've been at work for now 13 straight hours. So none of this like I've got it easy because it's the evening. There's no pint next to me. I'm running on empty here just so we could get this done for everybody.
I'm feeling terrible, if I'm brutally honest. I'm full of cold. It's always the way whenever I'm on holiday, the first few days of our holiday, you're sort of, I think the adrenaline sort of stops or slows down, and all of a sudden you get overtaken by illness and infection. And I feel pretty lousy, actually.
I'm sorry.
Not helped by having just walked the dog in what looks like sort of freezing fog outside.
Is that why your cheeks are so bright red? Because you're still like
probably
frosty.
It's blooming freezing outside. The good news is I'm going off to swim in the Caribbean Sea in 48 hours, so it's not all bad. But
well, if that doesn't fix you, I don't know what will.
I know, and we should probably start by apologising because there's been a bit of a gap since our last podcast.
There has.
And do you know what? What's surprised me most is we've had people messaging us saying, "What's happened to the podcast?
I know.
When's the next episode?"
I mean, people thought we'd given up. Well, I also before we get into what's been going on with us both, I would just like to take this moment, Ed, to give my absolute gratitude and thankfulness for your love in my life on Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, happy Valentine's Day.
Can you believe this? I'm spending my Valentine's night in an office room at the gym with you, as opposed to at home drinking champagne with my fiance.
Your fiance will understand. You know, when it comes to those sorts of choices, she's realistic. But happy Valentine's Day. It's a bit too early for me to register that, to be honest. But there we go. So what's been happening with you? We were meant to record. There's been a few occasions where we're meant to record over the last few days, and largely events have been overtaken for us both with busy sort of work lives. But at the weekend, I think you had to cancel because of the conditions you were refereeing in on was it Sunday?
Oh, it was like sort of, yeah. Let's not. Yeah, it was. So on Sunday, I had my first competitive game of the actual season. It was a Kappa Cup. Kappa Club Cup, Kappa Cup, something or other.
They want to rethink that. That's not going to work.
It was the Kappa Cup, something, I think. Anyway, it's fun to say, if nothing else. Although I haven't got my spit guard on today, so that's probably blown out the speakers.
That's probably why it's sort of hitting hard in my ears.
And for some reason the game was scheduled for 4 p.m. and it was 38, 39, close to 40 degrees on Sunday. And I had to run the line to the game before that, which kicked off at 2 p.m. So in the interest of health and safety, we delayed kickoff by half hour. So it's 4:30, hoping it would cool down a little bit, but it was crazy. Like you walked out onto the pitch and it was like there was no humidity. So there was no softness to the heat. It was like being in an oven. It was the only way I can describe it is, and you're probably about to experience this because you're off to the Caribbean Sea. You know, when you like get into I remember it when I got into Florida, like you get off the airplane and you just step out of the airplane. It's like, whoa, what am I being hit with? This kind of heat. It was like that, but we had to referee and perform in it. And yeah, it was crazy hot. And I just, once the game was done, just my whole system had been zapped. Like it caused headaches, it caused nausea. I was just very not in a good place to record, and I'd still had to eat and do some other bits and bobs and that. And so sadly I had to call an audible on the podcast. I do apologize.
Well, we're kind of slightly other end of things. It's not freezing here at the moment. I mean, it's actually bizarrely yesterday. The fog this morning is largely because it was super sunny yesterday. It's going to be super sunny today. We've got actually unseasonably high temperatures. I think it's like 14 degrees today. But the pitches, wow. I was out walking on some pitches yesterday, and they've had a lot of water, and they're sort of just at the limit at the moment. I think any more rain, I can see lots of problems with matches being called off. And I think that was one thing that somebody messaged in about as well in the last couple of weeks about sort of how do you deal with the state of pitches and whether you call matches off. Because I think one of the things that happened since we last recorded was the Women's Premier League game that Chelsea were playing, they started playing and then called it off, I think, after about 5 or 6 minutes because the pitch was frozen. And I mean, it's obviously raised a whole load of things about the state of the women's game in general, but also, I mean, I don't know quite how that game started. I mean, it sounds as though there's an awful lot of pressure put on everybody to get that game going because I think it's sort of televised and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, undersaw heating at Chelsea's women's ground, Kings Meadow, and they have a tent where they sort of try and heat the pitch, but obviously just didn't do the job. But that's kind of the problems here. So slightly opposite end of things than sort of high 30-degree heat. But there we go. And how was the match you did?
Oh, it was fine. It was a 2-0 victory to the away team. And it was a shame, really. Because no one, we all walked off and we were just all a bit, no one, I didn't feel like I did a particularly brilliant job. Like it was fine. Like I had no major issues and match control was fine. But it was just too hot to really play football. And
is it like that down the whole of the East Coast? Because the Gay World Cup takes place in Sydney in about 10 days' time.
Should we rephrase that? Isn't it the LGBTQ plus World Cup?
Well, I've always called it the Gay World Cup. LGBTQ plus World Cup is taking place in Sydney.
Is it? Oh, I never got asked to go and referee it. Is Ryan coming?
Well, no. In fact, only one of the referees, David Daly's coming over. Oh, he's there, in fact. I've seen he's in Sydney already.
Oh, okay.
No, originally that had been kind of my plan to come over and referee, and that would have been nice if you could have come down and refereed there. But it's kind of clashed with another sort of commitment of mine. So so not there, unfortunately.
These things happen.
They'll be struggling in the heat.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Rome being very hot when we did the European games. And
that was,
and it's like, not only am I like worried about the heat and my system overall, but I'm also worried about getting just killer sunburn. So I'm putting on sun cream all the time, non-stop.
Yeah.
And then that dries your mouth out, and just the whole situation was, and the brightness as well. Like, I'd run the line beforehand, and then I had to go and do the game. And yeah, just being out in the sun and being in the brightness all day that long, like it was just tough. So I was in no
place.
Burnt
some good calories though, I imagine. Burnt some good calories on Sunday.
We don't exercise to burn calories, Ed. We exercise to get stronger.
Yeah, that's good. Did you burn lots of calories on Sunday?
No, we exercise to get stronger. I got a little bit fitter because I put in some performance, and that's what I wanted.
Well done.
And
very happy for you.
Thank you. I'm glad. So yeah, that was the situation there. But yeah, the game was fine. Everything was fine. 3 cautions, and that was it. Really, nothing really else to write home about.
Cool.
Yeah, and then before that, we was going to record, and it was somebody's birthday.
It was my birthday weekend. Yeah.
Oh, I was talking about my birthday.
Oh, when was your birthday?
No, I'm joking. When was my birthday? How rude.
Well, I thought you'd tell me I'd missed it.
It was your birthday, wasn't it? You have missed it.
It was.
When was your birthday? 26th of Jan.
28th of Jan. So, right. This year I sort of celebrated it a few different ways. So nice. I had a busy birthday weekend, so that kind of put paid to that. So yeah, it's been a while. So sorry about that for those people who rely upon us for their sort of weekly commute, to kill the time. Sorry, being away. And we will be away again because I'm going to be obviously away now for another 10 days. So there'll be another gap.
For goodness sake, Edward. Stop
very sorry
jet
about
setting. That. And then it was my birthday the week after that. So that's why we didn't record then too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Did you have a nice birthday?
I did. It was good. Thank you very much.
That's good. Yeah. How lovely. So, oh, go on, after you.
I was going to say, do you want to talk about news first of all?
Shall we?
Yeah. Well, I think the first piece of news I was going to talk about, we were going to talk about, we also mentioned the sort of the Women's Premier League situation, and that gives rise to questions about how you deal with pitch inspections, because there's been a lot of stuff on social media, especially around that period of time when the pitches were frozen. There were lots of things on referee forums about, how do you deal with pitch inspections? Maybe come back to that in a second. But no, I suppose for me, the most pressing bit of news is the failures of VAR in the Premier League over the course of this weekend.
Is this the Brentford goal against Arsenal?
Yeah, the Brentford goal was one of them, but that's not the only one. I think the Professional Referees Association and Howard Webb, who sort of has been their representative, has come out and said, apologised and said, that wasn't the only mistake they made this weekend. There was another wrong offside decision in another game as well. So that's 2 in a weekend.
Was that due to VAR?
Yeah, I think it was another case again of, the Brentford Arsenal goal, the bizarre explanation that seems to have been given is that they were focusing on whether there was, I think, a foul in the build-up to the goal. So when it came to actually looking at the goal itself, they didn't actually draw the lines on the pit on the screen, which I find somewhat staggering, because when you're looking at a goal and you're in charge of VAR, you've really only got 2 roles, haven't you? One is there anything in the build-up, and 2, is it offside? And to forget to do one of those aspects, and what's I suppose even more bizarre about the whole thing was that when you looked at the sort of freeze frame, it was quite obvious. Sometimes you look at these things, you can't tell if someone's offside, but you do need the lines to kind of help you. But it was quite surprising. The Brentford player was clearly offside, but it wasn't given. And obviously, there's been quite a lot of uproar about that, because it costs Arsenal a couple of points and means that Man City get close to them at the top of the table. So it's pretty significant. And the Referee Association has just sort of come out and apologised and said, it's a user error, and we'll try and do our best to remedy it, which is obviously not ideal. And there was a similar situation in another game as well.
Wait. Just to cut in on that, right? So now I'm all for understanding like it's affected Arsenal. It meant Man City obviously have closed in on them, but all these kinds of decisions, like people pummeling referees over the course of a season for one single decision or whatever. If we look at literally the last 2 podcasts, we've got this decision now that's gone in favour of Man City because it's made Arsenal drop points. And then the last podcast, we were talking about a decision that went against Man City that allowed Man United to hold them. Like, over the course of a season, all these things come out in the wash.
I think the problem that people have is, I think everybody expects that there's going to be, you're going to get the luck on some occasions and not be lucky on other occasions. But I think people when they say that, are more about whether or not a referee who's making a decision has maybe got things wrong when you've sort of analysed it again after the game, right? Because things that happen during the course of the game, all happen very, very quickly, and it's all about, the person's assessment of the situation. But with VAR, the problem is VAR is brought in to eliminate all those problems, so it's not really luck, it's just error. And so that, I think that's.
But again, VAR is run by a human.
Yeah, no, it is. But you're using technology. I mean, it's obviously technology. It's used by human beings, but the technology is there to sort of get rid of these errors, and they've messed up.
But Ed, you use technology when you're using your F6 app, and it doesn't make your heat map look any better, does it?
My heat map was spectacular on the last occasion, and had it not been, I mean, I think you were quite hoping that it was going to be a disaster, and it was all going to be the centre circle.
I was just expecting the whole thing to be blue.
And I think you were secretly disappointed when I sent it to you. It actually looked like it'd been all over the pitch.
I actually was. I was mightily impressed, my friend. Speaking of fitness, I am right. I've had a few people ask me about the blog. that I promised that I would write, and it is in hand. I'm getting there with it. But if you want a little preview, I have done a video on YouTube that's all about hip mobility for referees. And we've spoken about your creaky hips quite a few times on this podcast. And so you might, get on all fours and start doing those exercises.
Crikey, I don't know what YouTube channel you were directing me to then.
In a fitness setting, Edward.
I went looking for it, and do you know what I found?
No, I'm not sure. I want to know what you found after your reaction.
Were you a bit worried about what happened? Like, input your name into Google, what came up?
Oh,
no, golly. What came up was you doing bloody exercises in your parents' front room with your parents.
Oh, yeah,
exercises for the over 60s.
Yeah, that's an awesome one. My parents are awesome. Yeah, that's funny. No, but yeah, so there's hip mobility exercises, which are really important for agility and change of direction and speed and everything like that. So obviously making content specifically for a blog takes time. And I don't have much spare time at the minute because I'm buying a house and things. So, but I'm trying to get there for you all. Just a quick update on that. That's a bit of a detraction from news. So what about white cards?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to explain how that sort of came about and the rationale behind it?
Was it Belgium, Netherlands, Portugal?
I don't remember which country it was.
Portugal,
but
somewhere in Europe. Not like it's a small place. Somewhere in Europe. The first ever white card was used to promote.
Portugal.
Was it Portugal? To promote good sporting behaviour from clubs and players, wasn't it? So I don't know what the full circumstances why it was given, but if we take, for instance, I think I saw in Scotland, Rangers let Partick Thistle or someone walk a ball into the net. The whole team would have got a white card in that situation to promote more positive sportsman-like football.
Well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of this. I'll be brutally honest. But, I mean,
I wonder why, Edward.
I mean, the first example of it, which was obviously the Portugal League, it was a Benfica game. I think it was being used in, and the referee used the white card to reward the medical staff from both sides who had rushed to the stands to help a fan who'd fallen ill. Now, listen, obviously, that's great. That's obviously what we expect to see. But I mean, honestly, a referee's cards are not a sort of pat on the back for being a decent human being for those who aren't even on the field of play. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I appreciate that. But like in a football setting, do you think it would have value?
No.
Why not?
I think it's absurd. Why? I think it's absurd because, listen, you just don't get many episodes of good behaviour on a football pitch, right? And your job as a referee,
not disagree more.
And your job as referee is to, marshal the game, applying the laws, right? It's not about sort of patting people on the back and saying, well done for being a decent person. I mean, I think it is ludicrous.
You know what? I think maybe a white card might be a step too far, especially for competitive professionals in that setting. I appreciate that. Okay. I'm willing to concede that, I think. However, when I'm refereeing, I'm always thanking players for good behavior. Always.
Yeah, like
two people, like if someone just rides a tough challenge or doesn't get up and react badly to a bad one or whatever, like I'll always thank them. I'll always go, look, thanks for just letting me control that, letting me deal with it, not reacting, not causing bigger problems. I really appreciate it. Like the other day, like it was a baking hot day and I had to make the captain come over to talk to one of his players with me. And like, I just thanked him because I'm like, that spends energy and that's
that's what you expect from sporting people. People playing a sport are meant to approach it in a sporting way. It's not about rewarding people for doing what should be.
But there's no real reward, is there? I don't think they all got £10 for receiving a white card. Like there's no actual reward. It's just the referee acknowledging to the wider stadium that the player has done
I know, but
a sporting action, because it is. I think it is more, and also like the view of a referee is always very negative. Like you think all we ever do is give free kicks, all we ever do is tell players off, and all we ever do is give out negative cards. Why can't we have something positive to do?
because it's a nonsense when the physios are rushing to the stands to perform CPR on somebody. The referee's going,
look, not
the yellow,
example.
not the red. Here's the white card. Well done for being a decent human being. I mean, what are we doing, honestly?
No, that's a bad example. It was clearly
you're not wrong,
and I bet you any money he was under a lot of pressure from the Portuguese FA to be like, we really need you to use these.
I'll also bet you a lot of money this is going nowhere.
He found the most silly situation.
It started in Portugal and it's ending in Portugal.
You're probably right, but I think it brings up the
point.
Right. I think it brings up the point of working well with players in terms of man management, and when there is good behavior on display, thanking them for it, like using that to your advantage.
Can you imagine Jack Grealish sort of steps away from a drop ball scenario because you ask him nicely and you brandish him the white card? Everyone's going to go, ooh, look what you've done well. I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
Oh, you've had your coffee this morning, haven't you?
I've had my double espresso. You're quite right.
I appreciate that, but like as grassroots referees, that's what I'm trying to bring it back to. You know, you're not there to be a school teacher or policeman, and like you work in like that kind of world, and policemen always say, like the key to being a policeman is you're not a policeman. I appreciate that.
No, I'm just waiting to hear where your policeman stories are coming from.
Oh, okay, great. Is like being a policeman isn't about laying down the law all the time. It's actually about man management. It's about bringing people on side. It's about governing people in a soft, calm, normal, sensible way. That's what good policing is. We hear this all the time from politicians and stuff. And I know policemen referees who use a lot what they learn as policemen into refereeing, and it's really helped them because of their man management skills.
Being a referee is like being on a town centre on a Saturday night.
Yes,
so of course the skills are applicable.
It very much can be. But the soft skills they use like that to bring people on side, to get people to do what they need them to do, even if it's difficult in some way, is a really important learning curve.
We shouldn't be patting people on the back for behaviour that should be the bare minimum that we should expect from sporting individuals.
But when the bare minimum doesn't exist, you have to encourage it somehow. And so I think there's a fair argument to say the bare minimum is void on the football pitch in the majority of situations at the moment.
Well, you've probably been a fan of what they introduced in Italy.
Oh, God. Wait, do I need to bring up the Ed's Fun Facts jingles here?
No, but it's like in Italy, because you're also a fan now of the coloured card scenario.
I never said that.
And so in Italy, in 2018, in their Serie B league, so not their top flight, their second top flight league, they decided to introduce a green card, right? Do you know what the green card was used for?
Did it help people get into America?
No, it was. I mean, where does it all end? It was given for fouls that were considered to be between a yellow and a red.
An orange.
Right? So if it was a green.
Yeah.
So, which doesn't make any sense either. But anyway, so then they go, and that was you were to leave the field immediately, but you could be substituted if they had any substitutions left. So basically, what it's saying is you probably ought to be off the pitch, but I'm not quite sure. So I'll give you a green card, which is a nonsense anyway, because if you think about how the yellows and red cards came up, it was from that referee who was driving down the road, looked at the traffic lights and thought, oh, that's a good idea. Green is good. Right. Amber's a warning. Red is a no.
Yeah.
And it'll come as no surprise to you that a bit like the Portuguese white card experiment, it didn't last very long. And that was it. And the first ever player to receive the first ever green card. So this is what I don't really understand. This is the other bizarre thing as well. So the green card was introduced basically for those fouls, but the first time it was used, the referee gave it to a player who said, "Oh no, referee, it shouldn't be a corner. It should be a goal kick. It came off of me."
They gave it for dissent.
They gave it like a white card for congratulating him on sporting good play. So it didn't get used properly. I mean, this is the problem when you start introducing multiple cards into referees' pockets. It's a yellow and it's a red card.
What I would say about the green card situation is if you ever do a game where you've got constant roll on, roll off subs, that can be a really useful situation. Like almost if a player's getting a bit out of hand, if you've had enough of him, if it was one tackle too many, but he's never quite crossed the line into being sent off, or you want to try and protect him, tell the benches, you got to bring him off. Like he's on the highway to issues. Bring him off, let it go, and all will be good. And I've done that from time to time, and it works really well. Because everyone appreciates it. The player appreciates it. The club appreciates it. The opposition, not so much, but they get over it.
Well, anyway, there we go. That's
right.
cards.
That's that.
What else has been happening in the news since we last spoke?
My fitness test.
I thought we spoke about your fitness test.
I think we spoke about it, but I don't think we spoke about it on here. And I promised I would give a shout out, but I can't remember where I wrote the guy's name down. Oh, here we go. I've got it. I found it, right? So I was at my fitness test. All right. And so if you're listening, hello to Bill Nwang. We was at the fitness test, and this kind of nice guy, but everyone's little to me because I'm 6'4".
Did he come up and ask you, are you wearing dark shorts
the story, Ed. Shut up. Actually, yes, he kind of did. So, screw you, Edward.
If he did, that would make me so happy.
We're going to enjoy this story then. So, he came up to me and he was like, "Are you Adam Humphries?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "You do the podcast?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I listen to that. Thanks so much. I listen to it all the time." And he was very thankful and everything else. It's really nice. I was like, it was nice to be recognized. Like, I was like, yeah, this is the way it goes. And talk about the Lord giveth with one hand and taketh away with the other. He then looked at me, went, "Have you taken your Imodium today?" To which I just walked away and put my middle finger up at him and went, "Screw you."
Well, to be fair, it's a very practical observation. He's a very obviously sensible referee to have asked that question.
I don't have his number, and I've not been able to find him since. So I don't know if he passed his fitness test that day, because you lose track. You all do it so much. But yeah, so that was a fun little situation. It was just nice, and it was nice to hear that someone again is enjoying the podcast and listening to it and getting value from it, which is always nice. And also feeling like he can take the mickey out of me like everyone else can. So you're getting an army of people against me, Ed. So thanks for that. But yeah,
Adam, test. I mean, let's be honest. You shared that story voluntarily. No one asked you for it.
Well, vulnerability is important. Humanity is important. So that's why I shared it. So yeah, I passed my fitness test. I've had a few people ask me that too, which was good. I think I got 18. I got 18.7, I think. And I had to get 18.5 to stay at the level I'm at. It was tough though. It was really tough. It was so humid that day.
That sounds like it's quite close.
Well, nah, not really. Like, it's pretty normal to get. I mean, a few people went a lot higher than that, obviously. I was clinging on for dear life towards the end, but a pass is a pass.
Good. And is that valid for the whole season now then?
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, till next January. Cool. And I'll be close to another year older, unfortunately. But yeah, all the prep helped. I got through it. The one thing I wasn't ready for was just that humidity. And it did zap me. I reckon it took a few sprints off of me, but it doesn't matter. I got there. It was the same for everybody. And got round and got done, which is always good.
Cool. Any other news since we last spoke?
Sure. We got a few questions we could get through. Oh, what about those two incidents I had in my preseason game? Do you remember I messaged you about those? So I had a guy handball it on the line, and I had an advantage for Dogso.
Oh, those are good. Do you want to look at both of them? Talk about both of them?
Yeah, shall we? I kind of don't, because I cocked one. I didn't cock one up. I actually handled it really well.
These are the nightmare situation.
They are. They're two really bad ones, right? So
I have to remind myself of Dogso every time I go and referee. Literally every time I go and referee, I have to remind myself of it. And it's one of the topics that comes up most when you sort of follow the referee forums like you and I do on Facebook. It's one of those questions which comes up very, very frequently, and that's because it's not entirely straightforward. But yeah, go on. You explain what the situation was.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say this is why preseason is important for players and referees, because you can just iron out those little moments in your life that you might need to know in a more competitive game. So the first one we had it was a corner or free kick or lots of players in the box. I didn't have a clear line of sight. And the ball's gone towards the goal line where the goal is. So a goal would have been scored. And my assistant flags for something, of which I'm not sure what. Yeah. And then so I kind of stopped play, I think, and went over to him and spoke to him. And he was flagging he said there was a handball on the goal line. He said one of the players, he kind of stopped the ball with his hand as it was crossing the line, as he was kind of trying to just scramble to keep the ball away. I said, first question I asked him was, did it make his body bigger? And he was like, definitely. And I was like, okay. And then the second question I asked him was, what's the answer? Or like, what do I do? So I then called the player over because I didn't see it. So I was like, you definitely saw it. And no, the second question I asked him, that's right. The second question I asked him was, would a goal had have been scored had it have not hit his hand? And he said, definitely. So I went, okay. So I called in the captain for the defending team. And I said, look, the ball's hit his hand on the goal line. It's made his body bigger and it's therefore stopped the goal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to award the goal and I would have given the player a caution, but I didn't. So I said, I'm going to award the goal and we'll carry on from there. Because either that or it's a send-off and a penalty, right? So,
correct.
Right. So in law, everyone listening, in law, the result here is handball on the goal line. It's a send-off and a penalty. However, I was in a preseason game. In preseason, everyone wants to just make the game
of 11v11. Yeah. They don't want to 11v10 in a preseason.
Everyone pretty much agreed that it would be better to keep him on the pitch, award the goal, play from there. Turns out the team that scored that goal went on to win like 8-0. It wasn't a big deal or anything like that, right. You know? Obviously, it's not an ideal situation. Although I only learned since then that actually in law, it is that. So at the time, I thought, no, this is what you should do. Like, because it seems really unfair to me that they get the send off, but then I think most teams would prefer the goal in that situation rather than the send off.
I'm sure they would. But the bottom line is, it hasn't crossed the goal line, so it's not a goal. So you can't start awarding goals for situations where it looks like it's going to be a goal. So that's the explanation.
Sense. Yeah. That makes and I don't see it from that point of view because everyone's like it was definitely a goal. Yeah. You know, and I'm like he's pulled it out. Yeah.
But it's not our job to
you can't make stuff up.
Yeah,
you're right. You're completely right. But in the context of the game, I think it was the right decision because obviously I have, as we keep coming back to, I have sole right to use the laws as and how I want as the referee. And so that didn't cause any dramas, but that's what I did. But it's a confusing one because empathy for the game, because everyone wanted the goal. And then this happened, didn't it? Did you see this? Was it in the championship? I think. Guy scores a goal. It might have been at Port Vale. So Guy heads the ball towards goal. Yeah. Defender claws it out of his hand, stops the ball going in. Then goes to another attacker. Attacker puts the ball in the net. And somewhere on that timeline, the referee stopped play for the handball send-off penalty. And then the team that scored the goal missed the resulting penalty.
Yeah, well, that's that happens,
But the issue with it is if the referee had just played the advantage, whoever it was, Port Vale, whoever it was, would have scored the goal. So if he hadn't have blown his whistle to send him off, the goal would have stood. And then what do you do?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is you just got to stick to the law on these situations.
I know, and he had to stop play to give the red card, which makes sense. I mean, you could argue there should have been an advantage played there, but an advantage on such an obvious red card, you can't play advantage on a red card. I suppose, that comes on to our next question, doesn't it? Is that a dog zone? Is pulling the ball out on the goal line with your hand, is that denying an obvious goal scoring opportunity?
Yes.
So then you could have played advantage off it.
What you mean is let it play out and then go back and penalise if they don't score?
Yeah, but then if you do that, you can only penalise with.
Can't give the red, can you?
You can only give a yellow, and that was the second situation in the same game that I had.
Yeah.
I played advantage off of Dogso. He went on to score. What do? I gave the yellow because you can't send him off if the goal was scored.
Yeah. Well, that also kind of makes sense as well, though, doesn't it?
I have no idea.
I mean, it's honestly, as I say, it's that one area where you I constantly have to remind myself of it because it's that horror story of what do you do when the last man goes in for the tackle. You've got to be able to interpret whether it's a legitimate attempt to get the ball, whether it's not. I mean, it's not straightforward, and of course those are the big things. I mean, getting missing a slight foul somewhere in the middle of the pitch, or a handball somewhere on the pitch. No one really cares about it. It's forgotten 30 seconds later, but you get that wrong, and everybody remembers it.
It's not easy, is it? It's not easy at all.
No, it's not at all. You're quite right.
It's not. Oh, and there's this other thing. A wrong player was sent off at Bolton. Apparently, did you see that?
I didn't see that. I saw you message me about it, but I didn't see that. I mean, it does happen still occasionally, bizarrely, especially. I mean, not so much obviously at grassroots level. I mean, that can happen, but especially when you're doing a match by yourself and there's a sort of melee or whatever, and I think sometimes you get it wrong, but not when you're doing matches at sort of top level where you've got proper assistants as well. It's
fourth as well, fourth
happens.
official.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see the circumstances of it, but I mean, the fact that it happened is not an enormous surprise because we see it happen even in the top flight games where referees have to correct themselves because they've dished out the card for the wrong person. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Should we do a couple of questions and then call it a night for everybody?
Yeah. I was just going to remind people, in case anybody's forgotten, about the discount codes we've got for our referee suppliers.
I messaged Joey. He said we've had a few sales. Well, not us. We're not selling anything, good. But that's lovely. Oh! Sorry, I've just thought of something. I guess what I got today.
Well, is this related to the picture you sent me on WhatsApp?
It is
of some flags.
Wait, they're not just flags. Do you remember, like episode 3 or 4? I put out an appeal.
When you put out your shopping list,
I wanted touchline flags. I wanted a set. And Ant Canavan, who runs the referee forum, rival podcast, so don't go listen to it, but he's a lovely guy. He had a couple for sale, but they sold really quickly. So I messaged him. I was like, have you got any more? And he was like, yeah, I've just not put them up yet. I'm like, don't put them up. I'm buying them. How much? And it's taken about 6 weeks to get to me. That's not his fault. That's the Royal Mail's fault. And so I now have my touchline flags back with spare flags.
Well, I'm very, very excited for you.
I'm so happy. Like, I refuse to buy them. I refuse to buy assistance flags here because I couldn't get touchlines. And now I have them. Anyway, that's going to make assisting a joy.
And that's a good opportunity to remind people that you can get discount from, in the UK, the refereestore.co.uk. If you use the discount code red or yellow 10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your shopping, which is really, really cool. And in Australia, Adam, it's
processports.com. Processports.com. My friend Joey runs that, and he said to me, we've had a couple of sales already, which is awesome. And yeah, the code is the same, red or yellow 10 for 10% off at checkout.
Perfect. So that's that. So on to the postbag. So which question did you want to start with today, Adam?
We had a good one. That was from Graham Wood. Hey, Graham, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, like always. What happens if a player doesn't leave the pitch for a sin bin?
Well, I mean, I think this is equally applicable to player not leaving the pitch for a red card, a red carded player not leaving the touchline. I mean, I think it's the same for all of them, but ultimately you are in control of the game. The game only proceeds when you allow it to, and it doesn't proceed until people have complied with your decision making. And in that scenario, you've got a player on the pitch, they're not complying, I think it's a stage thing. Obviously, you don't suddenly decide to, walk off the pitch, pick up your bag, and say the game's off. That'll be a little bit drastic. But you first of all have to explain to the player they need to leave the pitch. The game's not going to continue until they do. You're at that point going to be getting some grief from other players saying, "Get him off the pitch. Why? Let's get on with it." Blah blah. I think you need to explain to his captain and almost certainly his manager that he's been sin binned until he leaves the pitch. The game's not continuing. You're not changing your decision, so there's no point in everybody hanging around you in the hope you're going to go, "Oh, actually, I'll take it all back." And then it's about sort of increasing the sort of steps. Really, I think you then got to give the warning about what the consequences will be if the person doesn't comply, and the ultimate sanction is the person doesn't comply. You are going to suspend the game, and that's it. And it'll be for the league to sort out. And I think you give that warning, you give them an opportunity to comply, you make sure their captain and their manager knows you've issued that warning. And I think you're perfectly within your rights then if the player refuses to leave the pitch. In all those scenarios as talked about, your ultimate sanction is, well, that's it. I'm afraid the game is now called off. That's my view. What are your thoughts?
It's not easy, is it? It's not easy at all. I mean, obviously, the ultimate stop to that is an abandonment, which again you kind of want to avoid at all costs, right? So it's not easy. What I would say is, from a sin bin, you have a lot of upgrades available to you, so that's an advantage. So you can obviously just be like, well, if you're not going to go, I'll just issue a red card, because I don't know, what do you issue the red card for there? It's not violent conduct, is it? At that point, you could probably drag him into getting some foul and abusive language if you wanted, couldn't you?
Well, I mean, I think you are entitled. I mean, you're quite right to say that there are steps because, I mean, that's a very good point. With a sin bin, you're giving a person the opportunity to leave the pitch without getting yellow carded, right?
Basically, yeah.
If they refuse to leave the pitch in a sin bin situation, then
you could just give a yellow card.
You could give a yellow card. The problem about all these things is that
it undermines your authority.
Well, not only that, but if you've got a player who's not leaving the pitch in a situation where there's not really huge consequences for them, apart from being off the pitch for a short period of time, escalating it is not going to get compliance. I mean, the yellow card is not going to suddenly make him say, "Oh, okay, I wasn't going to walk off voluntarily for a sin bin, but I will do for a yellow card." I mean, I don't think that's going to make a difference, but it is the next natural step if you're in a sin bin scenario. And then, of course, if they do then refuse after the yellow, you can issue another yellow and a red.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually in that situation, I probably wouldn't go to the yellow card. I mean, look, I'm not very experienced with sin bins. I kind of don't use them. One, because the level I do, you don't sort of need to. But two, I just don't like them. I just don't think they are useful. I think if personally, my own expectation of myself is that if I'm having to rely on sin bins for a bit of swearing or whatever, then I could probably get on top of that in a much better way for the quality of the game. It's a personal thing, and there are leagues where I should use them and I don't sometimes, and luckily it's never caused me problems. But I think what I do in that situation is, if he didn't go off for 10 minutes, I think it's useful for children and stuff. I think that's probably a good place to learn it, because you never want to send kids off there. But anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole. Yeah, I know many referees who do. I think it's just they came in when I was retired, and I just feel a bit awkward using them because I've got no experience using them. So I much prefer to use what I am experienced in, because I know I'll get that right, and I don't want to cock stuff up. But I should, So there's that. I wouldn't go to the yellow card if a guy was not willing to leave for a sin bin. The issue you have here is your authority is completely undermined, and it's undermined in a very humiliating way. So you need to get back on top of that. So that player needs to be removed regardless. So if you just give him a yellow card, he won't be removed.
Yeah.
And if he's not willing to be removed, like if he remains on the pitch, then you have no authority left. So it is, like you said, captain in, say to the captain, this game is not going ahead unless this guy leaves the pitch. And he can either leave the pitch willingly under the sin bin, or you have to make him leave the pitch, or it has to be an abandonment and the game will not continue if he doesn't leave the pitch. By this point, if the player is of the type who's not willing to leave for a sin bin, chances are he's probably used offensive, insulting, or abusive language and or actions, right? And you could even argue not leaving the field of play when you've asked him to for a sin bin is an offensive action.
Definitely
you can show him a red card. And therefore you've got no choice but to get rid of him. The issue you have with all of these escalations is once your authority has been undermined in that sense, it's going to be so much harder to get it back. Maybe only with that player, but sometimes with other players on the pitch who are still on the pitch, and you could end up with carnage, which is why if it goes on for too long and if it's a big issue, a big deal, big problems, I think you do just have to abandon the game.
But what's really interesting, when you read
contextual though,
referee forums, there's these sort of questions come up a lot, this happened and he wouldn't leave, or whatever. And it's really interesting. The younger refs are sort of, when they comment, are sort of desperate to sort of not press the nuclear button. Okay. But the senior experienced refs are much happier to say, no, if they're not complying, right, you can't keep going. You annul the game. That's it. I mean, that's your power. That's what you do. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, I agree. You obviously got to try. You don't want it to. No one wants that to happen. I mean, having to sort of annul a game or walk off a game, whatever, abandon it is not the scenario anybody wants. But I don't think people should be afraid. If you've used the tools available to you, those haven't worked. I don't think in some situations, I don't think you've got any option if you want to maintain your authority other than to use the law to the full extent and call the game off.
Yeah, you have to also ask yourself, like, this contretemps that's happened with this player, how's the next hour of my life going to look if he wins this battle, or if I bend a little bit, or if I compromise?
There's no way you can compromise.
And not only that, also, like, how will it affect player safety? How will it affect my safety? How will it affect the whole control of the game? And so it's all these things you're having to judge in those moments. You're completely right. No one wants to abandon, but again, it's out of your hands. If they're willing to push you that far, it's their fault.
There can be no room for compromise, because as soon as you compromise, that, I'm afraid, that is the end of your authority. But as I say, I think it's difficult, but and I think you just got to work out the steps through it, and you got to keep calm. A lot of these situations, It's about just maintaining your calm, because that'll help you think better. But I think that's the best you can do, that sort of situation. So I hope that's answered his query. Which one do you want to do next, Adam?
Bradley. I think it was Bradley Lister who hosts the podcast that I did a little interview on a few weeks back that I remember talking about. He asked, if early in the game you lose control. Oh, and hello, by the way, if you're listening. If early in the game you lose control, how do you get it back again? I'm a new referee and want to try and get it right.
That's really, I mean, that is really difficult. And I've been in that situation before when things have gone quite badly wrong at the start, and you realise that, your authority has kind of somewhat been undermined by a disastrous start. My personal approach, and I think this is, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to all this. My personal approach is, in my head, I tell myself that we're going to do a reset. Okay, so but that's happened. Can't do anything about that now. Let's focus on making the next sort of 80 minutes a good game. Okay, and I'm not dwelling on it. Completely reset. I think I do subconsciously try and play a sort of a more subordinate role for a little period of time. I don't want to make any more. I lower my profile for a little period of time. So let's put a bit of distance between what's happened and the next time I make a big important decision. And so as a consequence of that, I kind of do, as you say, lower my profile a bit. Try not to make too many decisions, try and let the game play as much as possible. The difficult situations, and these are the really difficult situations, I'm not sure I have any answers for it at all, is when you do that, you do the mental reset, you tell yourself, let's just keep a low profile for a little bit of time, let's let everybody put a bit of distance in their minds between what's happened. And then there's another big decision to make that you've got to make. because you can't, I'm afraid, bad foul goes in, you can't just go, oh, I'm trying to keep a low profile here, so I'll maybe not give that, because then that's just going to escalate. Once players think that you've lost control of the game, it's, in my view, it's a complete disaster. And I think in those situations, it is really tough. But I think the most important thing is you've got to do that mental reset, because otherwise you'll spend the rest of the game thinking about it, second guessing it. You won't be making the right decisions. You've got to just get a sort of clear mindset and start afresh. And I know I appreciate, as I say that out loud, for a lot of people that might be very difficult, because not everybody finds it easy when something goes wrong. Just go, right, okay, that's done and dusted now. Let's start over. I mean, thankfully, I'm lucky that I don't have problems doing that sort of thing. But it's difficult, really difficult, and a really good question for that very reason. What are your thoughts?
It's a really good question. I mean, there's so many different pathways you can go with it, right? Like, I think lowering your profile is always good if you've had a big decision. It's a bit like running away from players when they're questioning your decisions. Like, sometimes it's just not worth standing there and arguing. Just run away and they'll soon forget about it, right? It also depends on how you match control, how you've lost match control. Like, are we talking about there's been a big punch up and no one's listened to you? Are we talking about, you've convinced yourself you got a decision wrong, like a penalty or something, and you said no and you've really got it wrong, or you said yes and you got it wrong, and then you're just beating yourself up in your own head about it the whole time, and players have lost a bit of respect for you because of it, and everyone seems to know what happened except for you. It, like, defining the words match control is difficult. I think
when I was thinking to answer that question, I was thinking on the lines of that sort of scenario whereby there's been a very big call that you've made, which has caused a lot of upset, and you're not sure whether you got it right or wrong. Doesn't really matter, because it's just been such a big incident that you've attracted a lot of attention to yourself, and a lot of people are then sort of focusing their energy on you. That's how I kind of envisaged what he was kind of saying in his scenario.
Yeah. I mean, you don't, obviously, as a referee, you can't let the ground swallow you up. You have to front up to things. So, like, as I always say, be honest about it. If you think you might have got it wrong, be honest about it in the right context, maybe sometimes. But if you think it's going to aggravate players even more, then don't. If players keep going on about it all the time, and if they keep pointing to it and keep moaning at you and keep screaming at you, then the only way you can get back your match control is by flashing yellows and just shutting down conversation that way. It's amazing how powerful a well-timed yellow card can be sometimes. I had it on my game the weekend. I had a player had started chirping away at my assistant, and I could hear in my comms my assistant chirping back a little bit, similar to what I would do. And I just said to him on the comms, I was like, dude, leave it. Don't get dragged into it, because if you get dragged into it, when I go to nail him, and I knew I would get him, I knew he was a yellow card. He was a walking yellow card, right? I was like, when it comes to getting him, it's going to make it so much more difficult for you. I was like, just leave it. Don't get dragged in. Don't wind him up. Don't wind yourself up. I've got it. Literally, next phase of play, bang, yellow card for dissent. Easy peasy. And it shut him up, like, for the whole game. But, I think that player liked the mental battle with the referee, and he tried to win it with me first, and he knew he wasn't going to. So that's why he diverted onto my assistant. And I think he got a bit of juice out of it. And then that's why I stepped in and was like, no, you're done, mate. And gave him a yellow. Like, it's really hard. But sometimes, like, I've had that, and I've said to players before, if you mention that one more time, it's a yellow card. And they're like, what? You can't do that. I'm like, yes, I can. If you say about that incident one more time, I'm just going to book you. And that's it. And sometimes that shuts them up. I do that sometimes with time wasting, when people are moaning about the time on the clock or whatever. I'm like, it's none of your business. If you ask me again, I'll book you. And that shuts them up. It is hard. What I would say internally, how I cope with those situations, is you never really forget about it. Just saying, like, forget about it and move on. You never do. Like, a mental reset's a good idea. What I do to myself is I kind of say my confidence always starts quite high for a game. And then a situation like that would drop my confidence a lot. So then I'm aware I've got a confidence deficit on the pitch. So now what I've got to do is I've got to rebuild my confidence. And the only way I can do that is by managing situations really well. So again, what I do is I break the game down into the next 2 minutes, the next 30 seconds, the next decision. And I just make sure the next decision get right. And then slowly but surely over time, as you build the positivity of getting those next decisions correct all the time, which you can't do if all you're fixated on is the one you messed up. Yeah. All you can do is deal with what's next.
I mean, I think that's a really good idea. I mean, the idea, I mean, as you were talking, I was sort of thinking to myself, for those people that maybe struggle about putting behind them a bad decision, I think to sort of say to yourself, right, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to make sure my position's really good. I'm going to really focus. And you'd be surprised that by that actual process of sort of just concentrating on the sort of next segment actually helps you sort of put behind you what's happened before. I mean, I think that's a really good idea.
And that's a really good point as well. Like, just press a bit more, just be a bit more present without upping your profile. Just make yourself, put yourself into positions that give you confidence so that when you make the decision, players turn and it builds their confidence with you again.
Yeah.
And that's all it's about. It's a confidence relationship. And that's a very hard thing to do and get right. But the only way to do it is to break it down again, and is to just go bit by bit, build your self-esteem again. The best way to build self-esteem, I say this to clients all the time, is to keep promises to yourself. So if you're going to promise yourself, you're going to, do your best on the next one, do your best on the next one. If you're going to promise yourself you're going to be within 10 yards of the ball for the next 2 minutes, do that. And then your confidence will slowly build, your self-esteem will build, and suddenly what happens is the players buy into that and they forget about what happened within reason. And you've slowly built the game. You've almost like jigsawed the game back together again.
But in due course, when we sort of get guests on here who, have got lots of experience refereeing, I'm really looking forward to sort of hearing about these sort of tactics people use. Because I mean, I just silly things like you talked about sort of the use of the cards to sometimes control a game, and then and similarly on other occasions when a game is getting very heated and you want to try to slow things down, the tactic of
I do that
literally
all the time.
giving everything. Everything that it just takes the heat out, it slows everything down, and it's those are sorts of tips and hints you get from people that have been doing it for a long time, and have seen the benefits of sort of certain things they've done that have worked in sort of calming things down. Yeah, no, I think that's really good. But again, it's another great question, because I when you read that question out to me again, it just makes me think back to situations where I know I've been in.
Yeah, absolutely.
A game's got off to a terrible start, and you think, there's a long way to go here. This is going to be a long afternoon. But you can sort it out.
I would also like to say to that point, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just a tough game. Sometimes you get something wrong and you've just got 90 minutes of shit to deal with. And I don't like being negative about the whole refereeing thing, but sometimes I'd argue this isn't being negative, it's being realistic. And then I'd say, actually, but when you get through a game like that, you're so much more experienced. You almost learn so much more from it. And then you can take that forward and you can analyze and think about, how do I get ahead of it next time? What might I change? How do I deal with it a little bit better? If I come across those teams again, which might be likely, how am I going to approach it differently? What am I going to do? And all of that experience really pulls you right the way through and makes you so much more well-rounded. The difficulty I think we have sometimes is people can be experienced to that really early on in their career, and it just completely floors them, and they don't get to see the other side of that struggle. But the other side of that struggle can be really useful, can be really worthwhile, and sometimes it is worth going through, horrible though it is.
Yeah, it's worth going through for two reasons. One is, I think you've got to remember, it's all a learning curve, right? Referees are always learning. No matter how experienced you are, you're always trying to improve, gaining from experience so that you're better on the next occasion. That's the one thing. The second thing is, every game is not going to be great. Every day at work isn't great. You have some bad days at work where sometimes, no matter how hard you tried, things have not worked out. There'll be some days when you leave work and you're like, I'm not feeling too great. It's not been a good day. All right. But the reality is, that is life. And you keep going. And then you'll have other days where you come off the pitch, you think to yourself, you know what? Did a really good job there. I kept that match running really well. I managed it well. It was a good game of football and I facilitated that. And that's a good day. And those days far outweigh the sort of the bad days where, things haven't gone as smooth as you like them to have done. So you just got to persevere a bit. Don't get negative about bad experience. We've all had them. And they'll come again.
Ed, you should become a coach, mate.
I would have liked to have been. I would have been a job I really quite liked.
An actor.
Was fascinated
You've always
when
said
I was,
to me you wanted to be an actor.
No, I did want to be an actor. There's no doubt about that at all. But when I was playing, quite. I mean, you'll no doubt mock me, but when I was playing quite a high level
croquet.
of table tennis,
high level croquet.
Person,
oh, it wasn't croquet.
And
table tennis. Do you know Matthew Said?
I do know Matthew Said.
Do you actually?
I was a county champion as a 17-year-old.
For those who don't know, Matthew Said used to do a really good podcast on Radio 5 Live with Andrew Flintoff and Robbie Savage. And he's written a few books. Bounce one of them. And it's all about human resilience and how you develop a sporting mindset, 15,000 hours a day to get good at something, whatever it is.
Great books. You would have learned about things like,
They're great for referees.
And I think I was really into sports psychology. Really was in sport, and I think I'd have made either a good sports psychologist or a good counsellor. I think would have been my two of the roles.
I think I'd like to become a counsellor.
Yeah, no, it's a tough old process though, because I know friends that are counsellors, and you have to go through counselling yourself to become a counsellor, which isn't a particularly easy process for anybody, even without any issues. But
I think,
anyway.
I mean, a lot of what I do in the gym with people is counselling, I think, really.
Yeah.
And many people say to me, you're more like my therapist than personal trainer. So I think it'd be a good natural progression. I'd quite like to. Maybe I'll call myself...
podcast.
Yes, maybe. Maybe I'll call myself the conversation starter. We'll see where that goes. But yeah.
Mindfulness with Adam and Ed.
Oh, golly, could you imagine? Sports psychology meets calm, dulcet tones in an English accent. God, we have enough trouble scheduling this one, let alone others.
No, I know, crikey. And so anyway, as people probably realise now, we're not going to do a law this week because first of all, we've been away for so long, and secondly, that we're going to a deep dive next because we're into the meat and drink of the laws of football with fouls and misconduct and free kicks, and it's going to be big. It does get dense.
We might need to just strip the episodes down to law only.
Or the other options which we've talked about is maybe sort of splitting the law in two so that we can keep up the format and not perhaps do all the whole law going. But we thought this would be a nice light-hearted episode just to remind people we're still here, give people their fix for those that need it, the desperate people that need our fix of our wisdom. Any other post-Berg matters?
Oh no, I think we're done. I think it's okay because this fact we're not going into law. We've done plenty. And I like to keep some up our sleeve. In other news, we've had 202,738 total plays.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Isn't that awesome?
Very pleased about that.
I'm very pleased about that too.
Well, I'm not going to give you a full fun facts series this week, but I thought
wait.
I know another trait.
Shush, shut up. Cue jingle. It's now time for Ed's Fun Facts. There we go.
If you'd let me finish.
I'm putting it in.
I was going to say, obviously the fun facts I had prepared for this week were all relevant to the next law, which is all about fouls and misconduct and red and yellow cards. So I'm going to save all those for the next occasion, but I'm going to just give you a couple of teasers to remind you. And you'd forgotten, hadn't you, about how the referee came up with the yellow card system? I told you that in an earlier podcast. Don't remember that?
How the referee came up with the red and yellow card? What red and yellow system? You said it on this episode, and you said he looked at some traffic lights.
I told you that way back when we were talking about the. No, you
didn't.
I even name checked him when we did it much earlier on.
Is it our friend who's basically built the whole aspect of who's basically made refereeing?
Yeah, do you remember that chap? So you do remember.
I remember him. I don't remember his name, but I remember he came up who's responsible for us wearing black and using flags.
His name was Mr. Aston, and he came up with.
Was his surname Martin?
No, that was his surname. But he came up with all these things, including he's the person responsible for the use of yellow and red cards.
Fair enough.
And it was all about, he said, as he was driving down Kensington High Street one day, and he was looking at traffic lights thinking, well, that makes kind of sense. It's yellow, take it easy, red, and stop, you're off. And so Mr. Aston, who was a teacher and a referee, said that, it's really important that when we give out sanctions, because there have been sanctions before then, but there'd been no way of communicating them to the wider watching public. So if you gave a sanction to a player on the pitch, no one else knew. The fans wouldn't know. The manager wouldn't know. So he thought to himself, "Well, how do we do about that?" And so he, it's quite remarkable, this guy, because he brought about so much change in the game. But he approached FIFA. I mean, he was a top-level referee. This is not some sort of park referee who suddenly turned up at FIFA's door and said, "I've got some great ideas."
Knocked on the door in Switzerland and was like,
well,
yeah.
But he said, "I've got this really good idea about using yellow and red cards." And
this is a kind of important story for our podcast, right? Like this basically is the genesis of this podcast, so we should listen carefully.
Exactly. And so he approached FIFA and said, "I've got this idea," and FIFA said, "Okay, we'll give it a go." And you, I know you like this bit where I say to you, "When were they first trialled, Adam?" And you usually say, "Well, it'll have been around the World or European Cup."
Yeah, it would have been.
And so
which one? Mr. Aston. I don't know when he was born. I'm going to go for the 19. Am I right so far?
Well, he was driving a car down Kensington High Street. So if it was like 1864, then it'd be difficulties.
When was Kensington High Street built? I'm joking. Was there I reckon it was pre-war. Was it pre-World War II?
No.
Okay, post-World War II. The 1956 World Cup. Was there a World Cup in 56?
No, I don't. Well, yeah, there would have been. No, there wouldn't have been. 66, 62, 58 would have been the World Cup.
Okay, that one, 58.
No, it was actually 1970 World Cup.
What?
Do you remember where that was?
Red or yellow cards didn't.
Red or yellow cards. Can you believe this?
1970.
1970 World Cup.
Where was it? Spain?
No, it was in Mexico. But isn't that weird?
Say Mexico.
When you think of refereeing, okay, if you're playing Family Fortunes and you sort of said, name something associated with a referee, right?
Red or yellow pod. Red or yellow cards.
Well, obviously the podcast will go first. But yeah, it'd be red cards. Yeah. And we've grown up with them. I mean, this is obviously pre when I was born, Adam.
1970? You sure?
And so 1970s when they were trialled. And wow. I mean, obviously, there've been sanctions before then. I'll talk about this, the next podcast. But there've been sanctions before then. But it's the first time that there's been visible, representation of what had happened on the pitch. And they were rolled out to the European leagues in the following seasons. Right. When did they come in to the top flight English league?
Well, it would have been around the European or World Cup.
No, because we're talking about the English leagues now.
Right. I mean, they've 1970. Let's go 1974. I bet it took 4 years.
It took longer. 1976.
No way, I was close, but no way. 6 years.
6 years until, and it will come as no surprise to you that they weren't very popular when they were first rolled out into the English game.
Surprise. Neither was this podcast.
And there was. What's quite interesting is there were 2 red cards shown on the first day that they came in, and there was quite a lot of confusion over what they were being used for. But anyway, they came in then, and what was it? What I was going to say to you was the last thing.
Was it when IFAB put them into the laws?
Yeah, I was going to tell you about when IFAB. But what I actually did want to tell you about is what was slightly more interesting is that having been introduced into the English League, the FA decided, right, after a while, that they weren't very happy with the use of red cards. And so can you believe that in 1981, the FA decided to get rid of red cards?
Really?
Did you know that?
No, clearly not.
The FA decided that they were going to get rid of red cards.
And I see another chapter for Ed's book about the history of football.
I know, exactly. Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It is really interesting. And just to finish off this is the end of my fun facts this week, because there's loads more for next time. But So they decided to get rid of them in 1981 in the hope that it would calm down the reaction of supporters in the stands, because apparently it was the fans were getting agitated by these red cards being dished out. Right? So they thought they got rid of that.
Did they introduce a white or green card?
No.
Okay.
I'm surprised they didn't, because there was some common sense prevailing back in the 80s. And then
I don't know about that. I've seen Queen live at Live Aid. I'm not sure common sense existed in the 80s.
1987.
I was born in 87.
Well, it was a big year because IFAB told the FA sort it out and put them back.
Good
and
for
so
them.
They came back into English FA football. It's mad, isn't it? So they were reintroduced for the 87-88 season.
And then the Premier League was started in what, 92, was it? 91, 92?
Oh, God, I can never remember. It's a long time ago now. But
So
anyway, there we go. That's the limited fun
very
fact.
Interesting.
Ken Aston. Don't forget his name again, Adam. He's an important man when it comes to the history of football.
Ken Aston.
And the laws of football.
He is. Yeah. There we go. What would you do about Ken?
Exactly.
Right. Well, I suppose we better call it a night.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a Valentine waiting for me at home.
You go do anything? Go for dinner?
No. I've got to be up at 4 a.m, so I'll be straight to bed.
Oh. Yeah. That's nice for her. Lucky lady.
Well,
not in that respect. I mean, lucky lady that you're.
We've had a lot of. So we're trying to buy a house at the moment. So there's a lot of so just cutting out dinners out and stuff is always good at a time like this in your life, isn't it? So
very sensible.
Dealing with that, trying to be. I'm not known for sensibility, so yes.
Or sensitivities, perhaps, is what you're talking about.
Whatever. It's been a long day, Edward.
Right. Well, my day's only just starting, although my dog is sleeping.
I hope you have the most marvellous time swimming in the Caribbean Sea.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll do. And we'll do another podcast when I get back.
And it was lovely. It's lovely to catch up with you two.
Nice to see you too. All right. Have a good day.
I'll see you soon, my friend. Get better. Ciao.
Bye.
Au revoir. Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Red or Yellow. You're clearly a very fit listener. May I gently remind you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Tell all your friends. And don't forget to please share it with any colleagues or refereeing groups that you may have. Good luck on the fields out there this week. And if you have any questions, please send them in to us. Voice notes can be sent to redoryellowpod@gmail.com, or you can contact us on social media. It's @redoryellowpod. Have the most wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening. Ciao, ciao.